Hello and welcome everyone to the Amateur Commentator. This is our Formula One segment, and we are back here after the and incredible Australian Grand Prix for the Ferrari team. They were looking pretty strong. It looked like it could be their season, but it seems that Red Bull have some other ideas. They have come back pretty well at Imola. So that's what we'll be discussing: the qualifying and the sprint race. We have with us again. I have with me Anshul. Hi, Anshul.
I saw it.
So the qualifying is done. The sprint race is done. We have the feature race tomorrow, and it seems like Verstappen in pole. Yeah, it looks good for it looks good for Red Bull, I think. Let's start from qualifying, maybe if we could. Four red flags and then the Norris crash that ended everything, and Verstappen was P1 for today's sprint race. Why don't you
Yeah.
just take us through what happened in qualifying, maybe Q1 and Q2, then we can discuss in details about Q3 as well.
I think it was a treacherous start for all the drivers. Even during the first practice session as well, the conditions were not conducive for the sleek tires. Entire practice session, the first practice session was done with wet and intermediate. That was something which trickled down to even the first qualifying as well. But yes, as you rightly pointed out, because of the nature of the track and the wet conditions, there were a lot of red flags. A lot of the drivers were moving out of the turns. They were landing on the grass. But the most interesting thing was what happened to the brakes of Alex Albon, because that's the same thing which we saw in the preseason qualifying with Latifi's car as well. So that is something which Williams will have to work going ahead. And like in two races in a row, Alex Albon will be starting from P20. So that is something which should be encouraging for him, that he might end up scoring another point. But talking about the other races, I think in the end, yes, Verstappen was lucky, saying that it's like we are not sure that whether Leclerc would have been able to beat his time for P1 if we would have not have had any red flags beyond that. But even Verstappen was hindered, by the crash when he set the fastest time. So he might also have had a better timing. But it was an interesting session because Norris and Ricciardo were also looking pretty good. It was an unlucky session for Mercedes because they set the timings in intermediate, and then there was a crash. And after the crash, the other drivers had already set time in sleeks. They were slated to come in sleek tires, but it started raining again. So that was something which was kind of unlucky for Mercedes. But I think Verstappen P1, Leclerc P2 is something which I'm very excited to see even in the race.
Yeah, I think it was P1 and P2 for the sprint, and even after the sprint, it's the same in the main race as well. So let's talk a bit about Mercedes. I think this is the least footage that Mercedes drivers have got in any race till now in the last 10 years, 12 years since Mercedes made a comeback. Uh, Russell had a good practice session, the second one where he topped the
Yeah.
charts, although there are a lot of riders in that as well. Uh, why do you see them in the race? Because even in the sprint race, they didn't have much of the pace. Finishing at 11th and 14th, they started at 11th and 13th. So,
Yeah.
how do you see the race panning out for them? Just a couple of bit of your views on Mercedes, then maybe we'll move to others as well.
See, as you pointed out, it was interesting to see, Russell doing quite well in FP2, but somehow the same form or the same performance was not visible when we went to sprint racing. But considering their performances and how they have fared, at least till this point of the season, the best hope probably for someone like Hamilton, he would be hoping that it's a wet race and it's raining throughout, because he's someone who can master the conditions very well. Not a lot of drivers, maybe someone like Alonso or Vettel and Verstappen to some extent have decent enough experience to lead the race in those kind of conditions. So that is something which probably might be the best bet for Mercedes going forward in this Imola race.
Yeah, talking about sorry, talking about rain. There was fair bit of it in the first practice session. Then it started the sky started to clear a bit during the initial qualifying Q1
Yeah.
and Q2, and then it again started pouring. Uh, and we got 4 red flags. So let's talk about Q3 and what happened with Valtteri Bottas, because he was looking good, and somehow he crashed. Magnussen actually did pretty well because he also crashed, but
Yeah.
he kind of kept the engine running and then came out of it and finished quite incredibly on the in the fourth position as well. So in qualifying. So uh, what happened in Q3 and yeah.
See, as you rightly pointed out, I think it was a quick thinking from Magnussen's point of view, and also he was a bit lucky in terms of where he ended up, because when we talk about, even for that matter, Sainz and Bottas all crashed at the same corner, even Lando Norris. So that was something which was tricky, because initially in Q1 and some part of Q2, when drivers were running the sleeks, there were a lot of dry patches. But as the rain started again, the corner, especially the white paint part, it accumulates more water, and it's on the corner side. So that is something which was proving to be a bit of Achilles heels for all the drivers. So that is something which they will have to watch out if come Sunday it starts to rain again. Because what we have seen is intermediates. It takes time for some of the cars to get into the right racing temperature, and if that is something which is not achieved when they are into the intermediate and it's raining or it's pouring and they are into the wets, it will be very tricky corner for all the drivers, not just for Bottas or Magnussen, who have already escaped that particular corner before heading into the race, but it will be a very tricky corner for all the drivers.
Yeah, I just felt bad for Carlos Sainz because he seemed to be having a bad luck in a Ferrari car that is actually doing pretty well this season, and it's not just one race, but it has been kind of a continuing story for the last 3 4. This is the fourth race now. Let's move on to the sprint race. Let's start from the beginning itself, from the first when the lights went green. Uh, it was a great start for Charles Leclerc, and somewhat not the most auspicious of start for Verstappen, and it could have been worse if Norris would have overtaken him at that turn. Uh, but both of them kept at pace with each other, both Leclerc and Verstappen, and I think at the end somehow the Ferrari tires didn't last for Ferrari as much as they did for Red Bull. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so how do you see that sprint race, and what are your views on overall on how the sprint race turned out? Was it something that was kind of expected, because that's what we saw in the qualifying P1, P2? It was Red Bull, Ferrari, and what was your take about the sprint one?
See, firstly, I'm very happy that both of the Red Bulls were able to finish the race, also, although it was only a sprint race, but that is something which is heartening to see. I
Yeah,
hope.
just before, sorry to interject, Anshul. Just
Yeah.
before we actually move to the race and what happened during the race, why don't you just tell us about the changes in rules that have happened with sprint races? Because this is something new. This is something that came from only last season, I guess. So
Yeah.
this is a pretty new phenomenon. I must say that I first watched sprint races and featured races, this kind of combination, in A1 Grand Prix some 10 odd years back. Never thought it will be a part of F1, but it seems to make the entire championship much more interesting, or at least that's my view. I would like to know your view about this sprint race first, because we can move on to what happened. But sprint race,
Absolutely.
what are your views, and what are the rules? Can you just tell
I
us about?
think from a viewer point of view, it's fascinating to see, two races in the same weekend. Uh, Earlier, this is the second season only for the sprint races, and if it was scheduled to have at least 6 sprint races for 2022, but it was cut down to 3 for all the reasons. But yeah, as a fan and as a viewer, I think it's quite fascinating. My only concern is, Going forward, if F1 is planning to include more number of sprint races in a calendar year, and if there are subsequent races in the next weekend as well, drivers might end up having 3 or 4 races in a span of just 9 days. So that might be a bit of challenge which F1 tried to avoid going ahead with the season because of the limitations of the number of spare parts which might be allowed for the team due to a crash. So yeah, going ahead, I would be very. It would be very important to see how F1 tackles that situation. Now, the last year, there were 3 races: position 1, 2, and 3, who were finishing. They were getting 3 points, 2 points, and 1 points. But from this season, the top 8 drivers who are finishing in the sprint will get points from 8 to 1. So that is a big change in terms of the points or how it is awarded to the drivers. The most interesting thing is in the records when we see, say, 6 months or 8 months down the line, the pole position would be occupied by the person who finishes uh, P1 in the Q3 qualifying session and not first in the sprint session. Although Verstappen won both the sessions, like the Q3 in qualifying and also the sprint race, but if Leclerc would have won the sprint session, but still Verstappen would have been on records as a pole sitter. So that is a bit of confusion there. But yeah, hopefully that is something which can be clear going ahead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, considering that this is completely new, I don't know how they're going to come up with the records and keep records and everything. For now, they have just taken the simple route of taking whatever happens in the qualifying as for
Yeah.
the records. So even though if the race would have been different, this would have still been a pole for Max Verstappen. So now let's move to the race itself. You
But
said
one
you
thing I'll add before that, but
yeah.
what this has helped Ferrari, when we are talking about, say, qualifying last, if qualifying would have been this, if this weekend would not have the sprint race, Sainz would have started from 10. At the end, it might not have made that much difference to the race. But since it's a sprint race, he had the opportunity to come, from 10 to 4 and eventually scoring points for the Ferrari team. So these, although it's this like just 8 points, 7 points, 6 points, or 4 points, but assuming Red Bull are able to solve their reliability issues, I think it will be a much closer race, at least from the team perspective, going ahead in the championship.
Yeah, considering that we have seen like seasons end with the actual champion winning the championship by just 1 point,
Yeah.
a sprint race where you have finished eighth could matter a lot as well. And I think I think the drivers like it. We saw that. I think they enjoyed. This is something new. But I do agree with you that in cases where there are 2 races in consecutive weeks, this could be a bit of a challenge both for the driver, for the team, from the logistics point of view. But predominantly from driver's point of view, you cannot expect them to have like 4 races in 9 days. It's a bit too much. Uh, so let's talk about what happened in the race. There's a good start by Ferrari, good start by Leclerc. Sainz also made a lot of grounds.
Yeah.
Perez showed his pace. I mean, yes, Lando Norris was there. Yes, Ricciardo and was there. Magnussen with his medium tires was there. But it does look like at this point of time, Ferrari and Red Bull are a notch ahead of the others. It would possibly be a two horse race going forward. Yeah. So, what are your views on how the race panned out?
I think it's interesting to see how McLaren has came along, in the last 3, 4 races. But as you rightly pointed out, although they are improving at a much faster pace as I would have expected them to do, but yes, Red Bull and Ferrari are completely ahead from all the other pack. I would not say that Leclerc had a very good start. It's just that Verstappen did not have a very good start for all the issues which he had, and uh, especially the DRS is very powerful in Imola. The straight line, in the where the DRS we saw with we saw with Perez, we saw with Verstappen what he was able to do with exchanging the position. It was easier for Perez, I would say, because he was overtaking a McLaren. But the way in which Verstappen was able to overtake Leclerc, that clearly showed how much powerful the DRS will be going to be in the Sunday race. The interesting point, the one point which you made initially, about the tires degradation for Ferrari. But interestingly, when we saw after the sprint race was over, the tires on Red Bull looked much worse as compared to tire on the Ferrari. I'm not sure whether that was just what we are able to see or how it's going to span out. But softer tires, lasting for 18 or 20 or 21 laps, and then we have 63 laps tomorrow. That would be an interesting thing to see.
Yeah. In fact, there was some graining that was quite visible on Max's car and even on Perez's car. But as Verstappen himself said, that their tires actually fared better than Ferrari's, because he could judge that Leclerc was slowing down, and as we spoke about it previously as well, if there would have been a couple of more laps, even Perez could have managed to overtake Leclerc, or maybe then both their tires would have gone down. I don't know, but it does seem like 21 is kind of 21, 22 laps, maybe 23 at max is something that this softer tire can do. After that, it's not going to work. So it's going to be interesting what kind of tire strategy that all the teams use. We did see Haas coming up with medium tires, and it lacked a bit of pace. Magnussen was easily overtaken, not just by Sainz and Perez, and but also by Ricciardo. So, and I think Bottas also at the end of the day did pip him to that position. So it will be interesting tomorrow how what is the tire strategy and how the drivers use the tire, because Perez is someone who takes care of his tires pretty well. I mean, better than most of the other drivers. So this would require, but again, saying that if it's wet condition, then all these calculations would be very different, and the strategies would be very different. Talking about McLaren, let's just speak about Lando Norris. He does seem to be doing pretty well. I mean, considering that the car doesn't look that good, and he's been consistently doing better than Daniel Ricciardo. How do you see that coming up in the next few races? I mean, McLaren do look like they've certainly improved a lot in the last 4 races.
Absolutely, I think they are in a very good position where they now can aim to target a third position, at least in the constructor championship. Because although Mercedes, they are performing here and there, they have been lucky at least in the initial part of the season. But I think McLaren is in a very good position to challenge likes of Mercedes or Alfa Romeo or Haas for that matter, and even for that Alpine for third position in the constructor championship. Ricciardo did looked much better in Imola as comparison to what he has done in the initial part of the season. Maybe they are able to do much better job with the car. They are able to solve the issues, or it says that Ricciardo is coming into the groove. It can be combination of both the things as well. But yes, Norris is someone who is looking much better than his teammate. And last time also we saw that thing in Sochi. If the conditions fare well, we have seen that Norris is a very good driver in wet conditions. And it is expected that tomorrow it will rain during the race time. It will be very exciting to see if that is something which happens.
So just before we bring it to a close and discuss what's our prediction going to be for the race tomorrow. There's one moment where Mick Schumacher overtook Sebastian Vettel, and I don't think it was in the DRS zone. So that was one moment. Taking the clock back kind of thing, looking at young Mick taking over Sebastian just like he did to Michael in his later days. So that's a good relationship. It's a mentor-mentee kind of thing as well. I mean, they both get along pretty well. So that was nice to see. Let's close this one. Let's talk about the feature race and what are your expectations from the main race? How do you see it panning out? Given that let's say if it doesn't rain, then how do you see it? And if it rains, what are your expectations from
See,
both the from both the Red Bulls? I'll say.
if it doesn't rain, I would say 2 podiums for Red Bull. If it rains, I think 2 podiums for Ferrari.
Okay. If it rains, I don't know. I mean, looking at Carlos Sainz luck, I just hope that he isn't one of the first ones to crash out, because it's just not going his way. But I do feel that it's going to be Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc 1 and 2, and it depends on who starts well and possibly on how the weather pans out, because I do see them being a bit better than the others. Although we have talked about it previously as well. We both like Perez a lot, and we hope he does well. But I think it's 1 and 2 for Max and Charles. The order, I have absolutely no idea. Yeah. Any parting words? Any final words from your side?
I think it will be interesting to see Perez, driving in the wet conditions. We have not seen that aspect of his driving. We all know that he's a very good driver, but that will be something which I am very excited to see.
Yeah, so no, we have not seen him in that condition in a Red Bull. That's
In
what
a Red Bull.
he meant. So thank you everyone for watching. Would request everyone to kindly like, share, and subscribe. And please write back to us on how we can improve things and what is it that you would like to see. So thank you from my side.
Thanks everyone.